Welcome to Nice and Blunt. I'm Adam Riancho, and it's Thursday, week 15. We have a game tonight between the Niners and the Rams. Who you going to start and who you going to sit? Before we get into the start sits, I want to bring up the stakes for this game because, at least for the Niners, this is the season. There's no chance they make the playoffs if they lose tonight. They would be 0-2 versus the Rams. That's a tiebreaker they don't have. They would also max out at 2-4 in division. This is do or die. While it's still an uphill battle if they do win, it's a complete death nail if they lose. So it's a critical matchup here. This is the game where the Niners remind us they're still a Super Bowl caliber team. They at least were last season. So they're going to lay it all out on the line. Everyone in the building is talking about desperation mode, and it couldn't be more evident this week. On Thursday, I do think the Niners win. Spoiler alert, I did tell you on Monday that was the pick. So I'll show you my final score prediction here. I do think it's a high-scoring game, and the Niners offense just will not quit. So I'm picking the Niners to win 33-30. It will be a one-possession, very close game. I expect a lot of points. The Rams offense is tough to stop. They will not just quit. If they can end the Niners season, you know they would love that. It's still a tight race between them and Seattle. They're still a game back of the Seahawks. They still have a game left to play, though, against Seattle themselves. So huge game for both teams, but even more important for San Francisco. I think desperation is just that much more valuable. Rams lose, but it's a close game, one possession. Might go into overtime. I'm taking San Francisco 33-30 over the Rams, and that means give me the over on the point total of 48.5. I see at least 50. Maybe I'm overestimating by a touchdown, but unless it's on both sides and no field goals happen instead, then this should happen. I expect the over to hit. But the line is very sharp. It opened at 2.5. However, it's jumped to -3, and I think that number, it will be a push. I do expect a push tonight. Niners win by only a field goal. Maybe Rams +3 is the bet against the spread. But straight up, give me the Niners. I do think they win. Historically, Kyle Shanahan does beat Sean McVay. Here is the recent history between these teams. McVay became the head coach in LA in 2017, and Jimmy Garoppolo joined in that second game that season. So only until Jimmy Garoppolo arrived was it a winning franchise for the Niners. And in 2018, Garoppolo was not healthy. He didn't play in either of those games. So when he returned in 2019, that's when the winning streak started. And as long as they had Garoppolo or Brock Purdy in the regular season, they were on a 9-game win streak since 2019 up until week 18 last year. In January of 2024, Sean McVay finally beat Shanahan in the regular season. He did beat him in the NFC Championship, but otherwise with a competent quarterback. That had never been the case in the regular season. So the outlier in January was that neither starting quarterback played. It was Carson Wentz versus Sam Darnold, and George Kittle did not play in that game either. Interestingly, neither George Kittle nor Deebo played in week 3. So that was a huge factor there. A field goal game. We all thought that the Rams stole this game. And if it went the other way, how we all thought it would, then the Niners would actually be in pretty solid position to win the division. So this rivalry is insane, and I think it will pivot back in favor of Shanahan. Niners will win. That is my pick tonight, but it'll be a close one for sure. It could go either way. I'm taking the home team, though. After having to score 40 points against Buffalo last week, I think having to travel in a short week, I do worry about the Rams a little bit. They could fall flat in the first half. But late game, it'll come down to the wire. Expect a shootout and a one-possession game tonight. But let's get into the injury report before we give you those start-sit decisions. There are some very important players who may not play or have already been ruled out. Most importantly for fantasy is Isaac Guerendo, the running back for the Niners, had 2 touchdowns last week, over 100 yards from scrimmage, and I do expect him to play. Everything sounds good. Adam Schefter reported he plans to play. He's still a game time call, but he was at least limited in the walkthrough on Wednesday. He didn't practice Monday or Tuesday, and given it's the short week, I think they were just being cautious, and according to him, he feels good. I think he'll suit up. Obviously, he's not 100%. He could exit early, and maybe we get Patrick Taylor as the most valuable running back in this matchup. But I doubt it. I'm going to stick with Guerendo. I think he's going to play. I think the upside's worth it. We know the Niners running back is a league winner. Last week, he had over 20 points in fantasy. I'm actually going to start him in the subscriber league. I'll get to him in just a sec on my ranking. I actually did lower him since Tuesday. But otherwise, on offense, their left tackle Trent Williams is out, and they have some injuries on the O-line as well. John Feliciano has been on IR for a while, but Ben Barch also out, and at center, they are running with Jake Brendel. Maybe that is a relevant factor. On the defense, it looks like Nick Bosa is questionable. I think he'll play. I think they've been saving him for this matchup, and he's been out the last 2 weeks. I think he will suit up. So it's trending positive for him, but obviously it's not 100%. And they do have a lot of other players on the depth chart who are out on IR, like Malik Mustafa, Dre Greenlaw, Kevin Givens, and George Odom also recently placed there. But most importantly, I think, is Talanoa Hufanga returning to the roster. Last week he did play, and he will play again on Thursday. So that's really important. Definitely need him against the Rams. They've got some talented pass catchers over there. But on the Rams depth chart, they are without center Bo Limmer. He's at least questionable. Maybe he plays, maybe he doesn't. And they're also without some left tackles. KT Leviston on season-ending IR. So is Connor McDermott. And Alaric Jackson, questionable himself. And then at tight end, they were hopeful to get Tyler Higbee back, but he's still out, yet to make his debut off an ACL tear. And then Davis Allen, the backup third stringer, is questionable. It looks like Colby Parkinson might get all the snaps this week. Only Hunter Long would compete with him. So maybe Colby Parkinson has some value tonight, but I'm not going to trust him in the playoffs. And then wide receivers Demarcus Robinson and Jordan Whittington, both questionable, not 100%. Perhaps if they're ruled out, Tutu Atwell could get all of those snaps as wide receiver 3. Maybe Tutu Atwell is actually very valuable tonight against the Niners, but I doubt you're trusting him. Just a flyer, mainly in DFS, would I consider it. In terms of their defense, there are some people on IR, but no one that's like new to the list really. But cornerback Colby Durant has been ruled out. He's not going to suit up. Maybe Deebo Samuel does capitalize as the backup corner will be against him. But that's it for the injury report. Let's talk about some start-sit decisions and get to Isaac Guerendo, probably the most important name that you are wondering about tonight. So I think he's a big boom-bust option because of the injury status on his foot. I did lower him 6 spots. I don't think he's as safe as Tuesday. I thought he would be a little bit more involved in practice, and it'd be a bit more clear at this point. He's still a game-time decision, so because of that, even if he does play, he might not finish the game. So I did lower him down to running back 19. I'm deciding between Guerendo and Pacheco, and I feel like if I had Kamara, Jonathan Taylor, James Cook, I would feel a bit safer in terms of floor with those players. But I think once you hit Pacheco, Aaron Jones, James Conner, I worry about the touchdowns with them and some double-digit upside. I think Guerendo has such a high ceiling. I'm keeping him in the same tier, but he does move down, and I'd rather go Guerendo than Pacheco. That is my personal decision in the subscriber league. My RB2 tonight will be Guerendo. Maybe I start Pacheco over Jameson Williams at flex, but tonight I am going Guerendo over Pacheco, unless he gets ruled out 90 minutes before kickoff. So make sure you know beforehand, but last week he had 2 touchdowns, about 25 points, and I'm definitely starting him, given that upside. But I think a must start would be George Kittle. Obviously, Kittle has to be in your lineup. I think odds are in desperation mode. He does find the end zone at the very least, but he's my tight end too. I'm definitely not benching him. I will mention though, he's not that great against the Rams historically. His last 5 games, only 5.2 targets, 3.6 receptions, 31 yards per game. That's pretty low for him. And only 2 touchdowns in those 5 games, 7.3 points on average, which is nothing special. It's pretty touchdown dependent to go over 5 or 6. And I'm really just trusting his production this season. He's been lights out. I trust Purdy to get him the ball. I think he scores a touchdown. You can't bench Kittle in the fantasy playoffs. You start your studs, but these numbers aren't his best. I'm also starting Jauan Jennings, who's been insane lately. He has great production. Ever since Ayuk went out, you've been able to trust him for sure when active. So his last 4 games against the Rams have also been his sweet spot. He's performed well against them prior to this season. If we look back at this sample size, an average of 18.8 points per game on 6.5 targets, 5.3 catches, 86 yards per game, and 5 touchdowns in these 4 games. Obviously, it's a bit skewed by week 3 this season. At SoFi, he had 12 targets, 11 catches, 175 yards, and 3 touchdowns, 41 half PPR points in that matchup. But Kittle didn't play, neither did Deebo, and that's a big reason why. I still think he probably gets double-digit targets, though, given Ayuk is no longer with the team. He's been way more established as the go-to option for Purdy recently. So I'm definitely trusting him, and these numbers against the Rams, he has multiple games with multiple touchdowns on the Los Angeles Rams. So I trust him tonight. I definitely expect a big game from Jauan Jennings. But Brock Purdy, I think will also capitalize on that. I think with some receiving upside with Guerendo as well, with Kittle and Jennings expected to score touchdowns, I would be trusting Purdy this week. I think he's a top 10 play for sure, my quarterback number 8. And if we look at his 2 career games versus the Rams, an average of 17.6 points is a very safe floor. I do expect at least like 18 points tonight for Purdy, but I think he'll have to exceed these averages. 250 yards is not going to get it done tonight. I think he goes over 300 because they're not going to be able to let up. There's no chance the Rams give them an out. They have to score at least 30 points tonight, and Purdy will have to carry most of that. So I do trust Purdy to move the ball a lot tonight. 300 plus yards is my expectation. He's never thrown an interception against them, and I don't expect it to happen tonight either. I think Purdy will be a very safe play, one of the must starts this week, in my opinion. At quarterback 8, I wouldn't bench him unless I had Goff, Burrow, Darnold, Tua, Jaden Daniels, Lamar, or Josh Allen. Those are the only players I have ranked above him. Start him if you don't have anyone else I just mentioned. But Deebo is a very interesting play tonight, and I do think he's a good flex option. Obviously, there's some risk. He's been terrible, averaging only 3.3 fantasy points the last 4 games, but some of those games have some big outliers, like Purdy didn't play in one of them. One of them was a snow game where he fumbled, and I think he will bounce back. I think if there's ever a game where Shanahan saved Deebo for, it's this matchup. And oftentimes on a Thursday game, they don't use that player that they're about to showcase on Sunday. That's what happened against the Seahawks earlier in the season on Thursday. If you recall, Deebo had a massive 100-plus yard game against Seattle, and the week before, he was a non-factor as Ayuk went off. The week before that, Ayuk was a non-factor when Jauan Jennings had that 3-touchdown game in week 3. So it's part of the plan with Shanahan, and I think last week's dud may have been game plan specific for this game. I think Deebo will pop off. If you look at the matchup stats against the Rams, he always plays well. He has 5 touchdowns the last 5 full games versus the Rams. And although he's missed 2 in recent history, an average of 125 yards on 12 opportunities, whether it's 8 targets and 4 rush attempts, he gets double-digit touches against LA when he plays them. 6.4 catches, 125 yards, 5 touchdowns, 21.7 points is a huge number. So I kind of feel low on him. I think he's a week winner potentially, but because of the track record the last month, he's been so unusable in fantasy. That is a liability. Good luck if you're actually going to start him. I think you should, but I am acknowledging the risk. He has a very high ceiling. I want to rank him top 5, honestly, but I can't. The risk is there that he burns you. And that's why he's the best flex play, in my view. Not a obvious low-end wide receiver 2, but if he's in the flex spot, I don't think anyone else has a higher ceiling than Deebo this week. Patrick Taylor is my running back 42. Maybe you're going to consider it as a pickup, but I think if we get the word Isaac Guerendo plays, you can't start Patrick Taylor. You just got to go with Guerendo. Maybe in DFS I'd consider it, but I'd only be rostering Taylor for the handcuff appeal to Guerendo. If you made the playoffs, you don't have good running back depth, and Guerendo is your best option, then yeah, roster Patrick Taylor as a handcuff. But I did unrank Pearsall. I'm not trusting Pearsall tonight. He is not a player inside my top 60. No thank you with Pearsall, just not productive enough as of late. But he is an interesting dart throw. I would also consider him a high upside option in DFS tonight on like DraftKings or FanDuel. But on the Ram side of the ball, obviously you're starting Puka Nacua. He's been the wide receiver 2 the last 4 games, an insane production, averaging 22.2 points per game, which is very noteworthy. His only actual game against the Niners where he played a full bevy of snaps was week 2 last season in 2023, where he put up 22.2 points. If 2 is his magic number, I think that's a good sign to rank him at number 2 this week. So absolutely going to start Puka Nacua. He had 20 targets in that game. Kupp didn't play, but 15 for 147 yards. that's money in the bank. And he's been averaging 22.2 points the last 4. I definitely trust Puka to go over 100 yards. He's a must start. No one can bench Puka at the moment. But Cooper Kupp, I also think you have to start. He was inactive the last 3 games versus the Niners, so we haven't seen him play them in over 2 years. His stats against them are really good as well. An average of 16.2 points per game on over 11 targets, 96 yards. While he doesn't always score a touchdown, I think he'll be needed tonight. I'm still starting Kupp. It's the fantasy playoffs. You start your studs, you have to start Cooper Kupp. If he's healthy, he needs to be in your lineup. So I rank him as a top 10 receiver. These numbers suggest he'll go over 16 points. But I'm also starting Matthew Stafford. Given the production to Puka and Kupp, Stafford always benefits. He has 10 touchdowns in the last 4 games. Not a single turnover, 260 yards per game, and actually 5 rushing yards per game. That's usually 0. So 20.9 points per game is clearly a top 10 quarterback, and I really trust him. Stafford's on a heater, and although it's a short week, I still trust his arm. I would be starting Stafford. If they can beat the Niners and knock them out of the playoffs, they will. I still think they can win the division if they lose this game, but they're not going to give up. Stafford as quarterback 9 this week. I'd rather go Stafford than Jalen Hurts against the Steelers. But in his last 5 games versus San Francisco, maybe these stats will have you pumping the brakes. This is concerning. 13.6 points per game on average, on under 250 yards per game, only 7 total touchdowns in 5 games with 6 total turnovers, 5 picks, 1 fumble in this sample size. These are bad numbers for fantasy. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe on a short week traveling, the Rams really lay an egg. Perhaps the Niners win more convincingly than we expect. Maybe it's more like last week against Chicago. I doubt it. I think the heater Stafford is on. You have to trust him. 10 touchdowns, no turnovers the last 4 games. That is a player you can't bench. So start Stafford, low-end quarterback 1, just below the guaranteed line, but at quarterback 9, I would be starting him in the fantasy playoffs. However, 1 spot behind Brock Purdy. If I had to decide between Purdy and Stafford, I would trust Purdy more tonight. However, Kyren Williams, I might be ranking far too low at running back 11. If we look at his 2 career games versus the Niners, he averages 27.5 points on 23 touches, 4 catches per game, and 108 yards per game, 5 touchdowns in those 2 games. 5 touchdowns in those 2 games. I had to double check that stat. I couldn't believe it first time I saw it, but it's Kyren Williams. Scoring multiple touchdowns is not a shocker at all for him. However, the reason I'm not ranking him at the top of this tier as running back 3, I kind of want to do it, is because of his workload last week. It's a short week, and he had 31 touches on Sunday. That is perhaps a career high. I don't know exactly what his numbers were last year, but at least this season, he has never seen more than 30 touches in a game. This was his season high on Sunday. And are you really expecting another 30 touches or at least 23 on just a few days rest? I can't imagine it's that high. So while I do expect a touchdown, I definitely trust Kyren Williams. I could envision Blake Corum actually getting involved a little bit more, given the quick window to rest. So I don't expect a full 30 touch volume for Kyren Williams. But once I looked at the matchup stats, I was like, damn, I'm probably underrating Kyren by like 8 spots here. But he's in the same tier. That's the beauty of the tier. You could put anyone 3 through 11 at anywhere between 3 through 11. So if you want to upgrade him above anyone else other than Jacobs and Barkley, go ahead. I could understand it. Absolutely. He could be the running back 1 this week. It wouldn't shock me. So have to start him. You cannot bench Kyren Williams. You have to put him in your lineup. Start him tonight in your running back spot. But other than that, I think Blake Corum maybe does offer a little bit of vulture appeal. There's some risk here if that happens, but I wouldn't be starting Corum. He has 8 straight rush attempts in those last 2 games. That is interesting. His volume has upticked the last 2 weeks. Perhaps it goes over 10 tonight, but only in DFS would I bet on him. Maybe goes over 30 yards, but probably does not score a touchdown. Otherwise, I'm not ranking anyone else in the Rams passing core, with the exception of Tutu Atwell. I actually bumped him up to wide receiver 60, my final ranked player, because of the injuries to both Demarcus Robinson and Jordan Whittington and the tight ends. I don't trust Colby Parkinson or Tyler Johnson, so Tutu Atwell, I think, will get all of the snaps as wide receiver 3, and that is going to keep him on the field a lot tonight. So expect some targets. I do think he's interesting. And if we look at his last 3 games versus San Francisco, he actually plays pretty well. He has 2 games with over 75 yards versus the Niners in his career. An average of 59 yards per game, 6 targets, 4.3 catches, not a single touchdown, but 8.1 points per game. That's a decent floor. If he does find the end zone, you'd go over 10 points. Don't be shocked if Tutu Atwell is an interesting bet tonight. So I'm not going to start him, not in the fantasy playoffs, but he could play spoiler. That would really suck if he scores a touchdown and Kupp does not. However, the defenses I am benching. I expect a huge shootout tonight, 30 points from both teams. I'm not starting the Niners or the Rams. They're in my bench territory outside the top 20, back-to-back at 24-25. It's a close game, high scoring. I'm not starting either of them, given the injuries that they both have on that side of the ball. But if you roster either of the kickers, go ahead and start them. I don't consider them like elite top 5 options, but you probably have Jake Moody, at least someone does. And if you do have Josh Karty, then keep them in your lineup if that's the best you can do. They're meh kickers, but go ahead. Don't drop them just for tonight. But these are the starts, in my opinion, the obvious plays. All of these guys are like studs, and these offenses are pretty high productive efficiency with narrow options overall. You're starting Puka Nacua and Kyren Williams no matter what tonight, along with Kupp and Matthew Stafford. I think they're both number 9, respectively, at their positions, both top 10. And Puka and Kyren are must starts all the time as well. But on the Niners side of the ball, Kittle's always in your lineup at tight end. Jauan Jennings has earned must-start status at wide receiver 12. You got to trust him. Brock Purdy, I actually trust even more than Stafford tonight. And then Guerendo, as long as he plays, I am telling you to start. But in the flex, I'm also telling you to start Deebo Samuel. The upside's too high. If he puts up over 20 points, you heard it here first. Don't be surprised. It's definitely what you should expect. But the last month is the only red flag. So I would start him. I think the upside's worth it tonight. And you need that ceiling in the playoffs. Go for it with Deebo at the flex. But some interesting dart throws only in DFS would be Patrick Taylor and Ricky Pearsall to play spoiler, and then Blake Corum and Tutu Atwell. One of these players might have some value. I think the more likely candidate would be Tutu Atwell above anyone else. But you're definitely benching any of the backups with Demarcus Robinson, Jordan Whittington, both banged up. No thanks there. And then Tyler Johnson, Colby Parkinson have not earned anywhere near enough trust. And then both defenses probably going to be very susceptible tonight. I'm not starting either of them. No thank you with the Rams or the Niners. So that's it. The starts decisions. And I did tell you the Niners, I do believe, will win 33-30 tonight. And that is my decision for Thursday Night Football, Week 15. But I also give you a bet every time I do this video. And tonight, I'm actually going on a $4 bet. I usually do 3, so a little frisky tonight. Wow, $4. But the return, I think, is worth it. 5 picks for $4.95 and 44 cents. I would love to turn $4 into just under 500. So if you want to join me, go ahead and use code Nice and Blunt on Underdog. Follow the link in the description and use code Nice and Blunt. Get your first deposit matched by 50% on SignUp, a nice little bonus to play with. But here is that bet. These 5 picks for just under 500. I do trust Brock Purdy tonight. I did tell you I think he goes over 300, but let's play a little safer. Let's go with 280, and that's a nice multiplier. I think Purdy will go over 275. I trust 280. I think he cracks 300 more likely than not. So give me the over on Purdy passing yards, and as long as Guerendo plays, then this bet will stay viable. If he doesn't play, I think it is void. If he's ruled out, there is no risk. So betting on Guerendo, 80 rushing yards, let's go for it. As long as he suits up, I see a high volume for him. And last week, he did do a lot of damage in the passing game, but I expect that to shift back to the run game. So 80 rushing yards, let's go for it. Guerendo, I think, might go over 100 if he's healthy the entire night. But Deebo Samuel, I think, will score a touchdown. I think he has a redemption game in perhaps his swan song with the Niners. If anyone's probably not coming back next season, I would assume it would be Deebo. I think from a trade standpoint and contract standpoint, he's the most valuable asset to move other than perhaps George Kittle. I think they're going to keep George Kittle. So unless Ayuk gets traded, I doubt that happens. Probably Deebo has his last elite game as a Niner this week against the Rams. But Blake Corum, you have to bet on both teams on Underdog, so I'm betting on the Rams as well. Blake Corum has been going over 30 rushing yards the last 2 games back-to-back with 8 rush attempts apiece. I think it could go up as Kyren Williams had a season high workload last week. I think Blake Corum with fresh legs could be an interesting change of pace back tonight. So I think he goes over 30. The baseline was like 16, and I definitely like the over on Corum. He's averaging over 35 the last 2 games. But then Puka Nacua going over 100 yards receiving is money in the bank. I definitely trust that. To bet on Puka over 100, that one's a gimme. So these are the 5 picks. The Purdy over feels pretty safe. Guerendo, maybe he burns me at like 75 rushing yards. I'd be pretty pissed about that, but I think he goes over 100. The Corum one, I think, is a very valuable bet. I think that line is way lower than it should be. Do capitalize on the Blake Corum bet. And then Puka Nacua, that's a gimme. I think it kind of all comes down to Guerendo and Deebo. If Deebo sucks again, I will be screwed. But I think tonight he does play well. So that's going to be it for this video. And if you enjoyed, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I can't wait for the fantasy playoffs to begin. I'll see you next time. My name's Adam Riancho. Thank you for watching. Nice and blunt.